Hello and welcome to the final unit of this online course in which we're going to talk a little bit about international trade and protectionism and some international finance as well. Get right into it with international trade. The book in the chapter 19 here says something I think is intriguing. They say it's unfortunate that we have to have a special chapter on international trade because international trade is no different economically from any kind of trade, whether it's trade with somebody across town or across the state lines. Trade is just trade. But the problem is when we get into international trade, there's going to be politics, there's going to be emotion, there's going to be sensitivities about people taking our jobs, some of which will be true. Shouldn't indicate to us that there's something special, there's something nefarious going on when people trade internationally. We want to recognize this, that nations aren't trading here, only people. Okay, one person trades with another person, whether it's a person from Indiana trading with a person from Illinois, or a person from America buying things that were made by people in China. Only people trade. We trade because of diversity. There's a vast difference in the natural resources and climate across the world, and probably more importantly in human resources, which we might call people's knowledge and skills. If you imagine a world in which every person had the exact same resources, skills, ability, and the exact same preferences, meaning they want the exact same thing at the exact time in the exact quantities, there'd actually be no grounds for trade. Because if I had exactly what you had already, and I wanted exactly what you wanted, why would we trade? Okay, we would be in irreconcilable conflict with each other. But because you and I have something different to begin with in terms of the resources we have disposal of or our skills and knowledge, and we want different things, okay, then we've got some grounds for trade. The great thing about international trade is we're going to be able to tap into a very wide array of different skills and knowledge and natural resources, and a very vast array of different tastes and preferences. So there's going to be tremendous opportunities for trade when we cross international lines. But we always want to keep in mind that international trade is still just trade. Trade is great. International trade is going to be great, but it's still just trade. So we want to check our political and emotional and cultural prejudices, if you will, at the door when we're analyzing international trade. Okay, and here's some examples of something that's kind of obvious and visible, which is the natural resources and the climatological differences. The top picture, that's basically us here in the Midwest and U.S. What is our main natural resource? Well, if you look around, especially in the summer, you can see the crops growing out in the fields. The main resource there is the dirt and the rain. Okay, we've got good dirt to grow crops in, and we've got rain. So we grow crops like corn and soybeans that are then much of which exported to the rest of the world. Okay. The middle picture there, that's the South American desert. They have no trees, they have no grass, no rain. What they do have is minerals. This is a big copper mine. Okay, so what they do there is, with their natural resources, is extract copper out of the ground, and they'll ship a lot of it up to the U.S. and Europe to be turned into electronics and computers and that kind of thing. Okay, and at the bottom there's a mountainous nation of New Zealand where the sheep outnumber people something like 10 to 1. They have some dirt and rain, but it's too hilly to grow lots of crops, so what they do is they turn the sheep loose on it and turn it into a bunch of wool and make sweaters and other nice things, and they'll send us the sweaters in exchange for South American copper or American corn. Okay, those are just a few examples. Now, why do we trade? This should hopefully go without saying. Hopefully we've all learned enough economics by now, but I think it is a very fundamental point and it bears repeating, if only briefly. Okay. We trade because it makes us better off. Okay, both parties to any trade will be made better off by it. Milton Friedman, great economist who we're very familiar with by now, states it in this way: if an exchange is voluntary, it will not take place unless both parties believe they will benefit. Okay. How do we know this? Well, think about it. If either party didn't think he or she would benefit, what would he or she do? Not trade. Okay, so we know that trade is going to be beneficial in general in the long run, because if it weren't, people would stop doing it. And we do. Particular trades, particular transactions, particular deals that turn out badly, we try to avoid making those kind of deals in the future. Okay. Now, Adam Smith is going to comment on the kind of appropriateness of trading with different people. He says it's the maxim of every prudent master of a family never to attempt to make at home what it will cost him more to make than to buy. And so what Smith is saying here is that you trade, you buy, in other words, you trade because it's cheaper. Duh. But here's the point. This is pretty commonsensical, but we're going to apply it to this realm of international trade. Okay, moving on with Smith's quote, he says, "What is prudence in the conduct of every private family can scarce be folly in that of a great kingdom." So you don't try to grow your own food, you don't try to make your own beef and grow your own tomatoes and grow your own wheat so you can make the ingredients for a cheeseburger, do you? No, you buy it from the store, right? And how do you buy it? Well, you sell something different. You go and you work for a company, you work in a store, you maybe provide some other kind of specialized service which you might not ever use yourself. Okay, we do specialization in trade because it's cheaper, and therefore we can buy more stuff because of it. We overall become more productive because of it. Okay. What is prudence in the conduct of every private family? Import. Okay, don't make it yourself. Import it if it's cheaper. Can scarce be folly in that of a great kingdom. America will find Americans will import things because they're cheaper. From where? From whoever can provide them for cheaper. Whether it's out of town, whether it's buying things from one town over, one state over, or one country over, the economics is going to be exactly the same, and we have no reason to fear. People will have this intrinsic fear of international trade for various reasons, but that's nonsense. Okay, and that's one of the main lessons we want to learn here. Okay, so with that in mind, what we're going to do is talk in kind of specific terms about why trade is so great, why it makes us better off, and we're going to look at three categories here, three kinds of explanations. First of which is the division of knowledge. Adam Smith will refer to this as the division of labor, but we want to be a little more general and think about division of knowledge, because as we've seen, it's not just physical labor that goes into producing goods, but even more so, it's the knowledge, the mental ability, the skills that exist in people's minds. Okay. And my favorite example of we've observed how this works is with Leonard Read's famous little booklet, I, Pencil, where he talks about the division of the labor and knowledge into making something so simple as a pencil. It's divided up into millions of tiny bits of knowledge that are possessed by individual people in the production process that are spread all over the whole world. Okay. And the point here is that division of knowledge makes us more productive. Okay, for reasons that Read explained. Because we can develop, we can bring basically more people into the process, and more people can achieve more production than individuals working by themselves. So it stands to reason that if we increase the number of people, we can expand the knowledge that we can tap into, and we can kind of refine this division of knowledge, and the world can, in general, become a more productive place. So you kind of want to imagine whose knowledge could we potentially bring to bear into the division of knowledge process. Well, potentially, hopefully, everybody across the whole world. Okay, and this will maximize our gains from the division of knowledge. Okay, at the other end of the spectrum here, I want us to consider a situation in which there's very little to no division of knowledge, division of labor, and people are trying to make everything themselves rather than trading for it, rather than buying, importing. Okay. You kind of envision here this self-sufficient frontier family who's growing everything themselves, making everything themselves. I want you to think about what's their standard of living going to be like if they literally have to make everything they consume by themselves. Standard of living is going to be very low. Okay? They're going to be very subject to being wiped out by basic diseases because they can't acquire the products of medicine, which itself is a highly specialized field of endeavor. Okay. They're not going to have much in the way of entertainment options. Okay. It's going to be a work life of toil and work. Okay. But hey, they're not importing. Okay, they don't have a trade deficit. Well, they don't have to worry about losing their jobs to foreign competition, do they? No, they don't. Still, their standard of living is pathetic. Okay, so we want to recognize right away that trade is just a formula for becoming extremely more productive. It'll create some different kinds of problems, but the big thing it helps us to solve, okay, the big challenge we can overcome is producing a lot more goods and services at a lot lower prices. Okay. This is my favorite extreme example of this self-sufficiency. This is Tom Hanks' character here in this movie Castaway. Okay, he's a one-man economy. Okay, he didn't have to worry about trade deficits. He didn't have to worry about unemployment. He's constantly busy, but look at what his standard of living is like. Okay, it's lonely, cold. It's just a not very comfortable existence. This is what life without trade is like. Okay, now a second category of why trade is so powerful is this concept of the economies of scale. This is a concept you probably came across in your micro course. What we're talking about is when you scale up production, when you increase production of any particular good to a very large volume, you can reduce the unit cost of production. Okay. Large scale means low costs in a competitive industry. Low costs mean low prices for the consumer, because the only way to gain market share and to expand in a competitive industry is to bring prices down to attract customers. Okay. And if you remember, one of my big spiels in micro is that in a competitive industry, long run profits fall to zero and all the surplus goes to the consumer. Who's the consumer? Hey, that's all of us, right? So this is actually kind of the essence of economic progress here. Well, how do you achieve scale? Here's one of my favorite examples. Henry Ford and the Model T.
See what I see. Henry Ford's assembled us a Model T. Let's take a drive down American history, learn more about this tin limousine. Ford's dream was to mass produce an affordable car for everyday use. And after many tries and a few false starts, he organized a way to assemble the parts.
The most ubiquitous car in the world, actually, and in its time, and they produced 15 million of these things from 1908 to 1927. How do you produce such a great scale? Well, you need a very large market to sell it into. Fortunately for Ford, he's got a very large country and a very wealthy country where people can afford cars, which is the U.S. Okay. So he doesn't need international trade per se to make the Model T successful, although quite a few of them are going to be shipped abroad and assembled and sold overseas. Okay. But that's actually not the most mass-produced car in world history. Any guesses as to what eclipsed the Model T? Think of a very common car. You can pat yourself on the back if you thought of the Volkswagen Beetle. Volkswagen Beetle is going to be the only car that's made in greater numbers than the Model T Ford. Okay. And if you know anything, if you're a car buff like me, the Volkswagen Beetle Type 1 here was actually kind of like a Model T type car of its time, which is the 1950s, 60s, 70s. Actually, it was made up until 2000s. just an economy car, kind of a low-priced, efficient, reliable, no frills car for the working man, for the everyman, so to speak, just like the Model T was back in the 1920s. Okay. Actually made about 22 million of these. Now, I will suggest that international trade was essential for the success of the Volkswagen Beetle because it was made in a much smaller country. Okay, Germany, after World War II, when they started to be produced in large numbers, much smaller country, not quite as rich as the U.S., and the Volkswagen company would not have been able to survive trying to just sell these within Germany. Of course, most of them were sold overseas. In fact, 6 million of them were made overseas just to cut down on the transportation costs of shipping them overseas. So this is a car where the only reason the scale could get so large is because they could rely on international trade. They could sell them throughout the whole world. Okay. So international trade is going to be a mechanism for companies to achieve large economies of scale, therefore low costs and therefore low prices for consumers, economic progress. The maximum scale we can possibly achieve is the whole world. Okay. Adam Smith recognized this. He said the division of labor is limited by the extent of the market. If you don't have a very extensive market, you're not going to have much division of labor. If you have a more extensive market, you can have more division of labor, division of knowledge, therefore greater scale, lower costs, lower prices, higher real incomes, economic progress. Okay, now the final point we want to address in explaining the wonders and the benefits of international trade, it's a little more complex. It's a point known as comparative advantage. On this point, the great economist Paul Samuelson said, "This is one of the few things in economics that is both true and not obvious." Okay. Other things are obvious. Things like supply and demand, I think they're not that hard to tackle. They're not that hard to understand, to wrap your head around. But comparative advantage is a little tricky. What we're going to be arguing here is that everyone is the low-cost producer of some good. Therefore, everyone has something to contribute in positive fashion towards increasing total productivity in the world economy. Now, the reason it's going to be not so obvious is because we'll see that in trading scenarios, which we'll look at here in a minute, one country may indeed be a lower cost country for several goods. Okay, so you might be thinking, well, they're lower cost than several goods. How could they possibly benefit from trade? Nobody has lower costs. Well, that might be true, okay, but what we want to realize is opportunity costs of time, okay, are going to be the relevant costs here. Not just the raw costs of labor or capital or money required to produce a particular item, but the opportunity cost of time. Okay, scarcity is always a binding constraint, and if we can sort of reshuffle the way goods are produced throughout the world economy to allow those production of goods to take place in the country where the opportunity cost is lowest, we can still increase total productivity. But let me break it down to a more simple example for starters, and then we'll try to bring it back to the kind of our textbook scenario. The example I like to use is playing Legos with my kids. Okay, now, that's actually not my house. That's just a picture I found online, but this is a little bit what it's like. My kids wanted to play Legos, and I finally relented when they got a little old enough to not swallow the pieces, and I brought down my tub of Legos, which has tens of thousands of pieces, and you have to envision here that I have all the different Lego sets. I have the pirate ships, and I have the castle, and I have the fire truck, and I have the space shuttle. Okay, all these different kinds of sets of Legos. So to build a set, and I asked my kids, well, what would you like to build? And they say the castle. Okay, to build the castle, we get out the instructions to build the castle. And as you can imagine, if you've ever done this, you know from experience what you need to do first off is select out the castle pieces from amongst all the other pieces. And I've got a tub of 10,000 pieces. So we need to dig through and select out the castle pieces. The second step is to take the instructions and to put the castle pieces together in the right order, in the right fashion to build up the castle. Okay. Now my kids want to build the castle, but they're young and just not very well educated yet. They don't know how to follow those instructions. They can't do that at all. Okay. Now they also, because they've never played with Legos, aren't very good at picking out the pieces that we need to build the castle. Okay, but the point is that they can do that. Okay, they can't follow the instructions at all. They're not very good at picking the pieces out, but they are somewhat able to do that. I, on the other hand, I'm a Lego expert because I have 25 years of Lego experience. I can do both of these tasks exceedingly well. Okay, I am a lot better at both of these tasks than my kids are. So you might be thinking, well, why don't you just do the whole process for them and then, you know, have them play with it after you're done? And I thought about that, but I said, no, my kids are going to learn a lesson here in comparative advantage. Okay, let's just numerically rate my skill level versus theirs at building, at following the instructions. Okay, building the set. Let's say my skill level is 100 and theirs is 0. Okay, obviously they're not going to be able to do that. I'm very good at it, so I'm going to do that. At searching and finding the pieces, at picking out the pieces, I'm going to say my skill level again is 100 and theirs is only 10. I might say, well, gee, they're so inferior. Why would they even, participate in that at all? Well, here's the point. Even though they're so much worse at that, the fact is that they can do it. They can't do the building the sets component, okay, which I can. Every piece they find, therefore, is a piece that I don't have to find, and that's time that I can spend. Instead of searching for pieces, I can spend that building the set. Okay. So, and if you can imagine, if I had a couple kids, which I do, I put both of my kids to work searching, and that's even less time that I have to spend searching, and that's more time that I can afford to specialize on building. Okay. So you see that when you bring people with very low skills in, even though they seemingly don't have much to offer, they can replace labor that has even more value doing something else. And that's exactly what we're going to observe in international trade. Okay? They're going to bring a comparative advantage, even though they have no what we call absolute advantage, meaning their efficiency is lower in all forms of production. They're going to be comparatively more efficient in one kind of production, and that's going to allow other people to specialize more in another kind of production, and we're going to have a higher total production because of this, and the world is going to gain from international trade. Let me break it into a more concrete example that's provided in the textbook, which is trade between the US and Mexico. So we're going to look at a very simplified example, but what we're looking at is two goods. So we've got computers and shirts and two countries, Mexico and the US, and this says how many labor units are required to produce each good. Okay, it takes 12 hours of labor to produce one computer in Mexico, or 2 hours of labor to produce one shirt in Mexico. In the US, much more efficient, more capital intensive economy, it only takes 1 hour to produce a computer, or 1 labor hour to produce a shirt. Okay. Now, in case you're thinking this is too simplistic, it doesn't make any sense, well, just think about it in these terms. We're talking about kind of low-skilled type of goods and low-skilled industries. That's what shirts is. Okay, and we're talking about high-skilled, high-tech industries. That's what computers is. And then we're talking about highly developed countries like the U.S. and developing countries like Mexico. Okay, so this is really just kind of a metaphor for this whole the different tiers of high and low-skilled industries and developed and developing countries. Okay. And the raw numbers, just think about the raw numbers so they make sense. The US is a heck of a lot more productive in the high-tech industries and quite a bit more productive in the low-tech industries, but a heck of a lot more productive in the high-tech industries. Does that make sense? Well, if you kind of have been observing the news and the patterns of production, specialization, and trade in the US, yeah, you'll find this makes a lot of sense. This is a somewhat accurate depiction of the real world. Now you might be wondering, well, the U.S. is a lot more productive, 12 times as productive in computers and 2 times as productive in shirts. why would the US ever trade with Mexico? Mexico's not nearly as productive in either good. Okay, you might be thinking the US should do both because the US is more productive in both. Well, the US is more productive in both, but there's still a scarcity that we have to reckon with, which is we don't have an infinite number of labor units. Okay, we have a finite number of labor units, and the question remains, what should be done with those labor units that are available? Okay, labor hours. There's only 24 hours a day. Time is limited. Okay, so we can't do everything. We can't do an infinite number of both. We still have to choose, and Mexico still has to choose what's going to guide the choice. What's going to guide the choice is a concept of looking at the opportunity cost. Okay. And when we compare opportunity costs, we're going to see there's an obvious answer here for the question of what should each country focus on. Okay. Remember, the opportunity cost means the value of that is foregone. The value of that which is foregone. The value of a foregone opportunity. Okay. When you choose to study, that's giving up on partying. Okay. When you choose to work, that's giving up on studying, maybe. When you choose to sleep, that's giving up on going to class. Okay, things of this nature. So we always want to conceive of costs in terms of the opportunity foregone. Okay, and that's the way economically that we need to reckon with costs. Okay, in our simple two economy, two good example, okay, to spend labor units producing more computers means less shirts, and vice versa. To spend labor units producing more shirts means those labor units can't produce computers. So the opportunity cost of computers is going to be in terms of shirts, and the opportunity cost of shirts is going to be in terms of computers. To produce more computers means producing less shirts, and vice versa. Okay. So what's the opportunity cost for one computer? Mexico, to produce one computer, requires 12 labor hours. With those 12 labor hours, 12 divided by 2, they could produce 6 shirts. Okay. Let's look for the US. What's the opportunity cost for one computer in the US? While in the US, to produce one computer requires 1 labor hour, which could have produced 1 shirt. Okay, so that's 1 right there. Okay, now what's the opportunity cost for producing shirts? In Mexico, 1 shirt requires 2 labor hours. 2 hours could have produced 1/6, 2 divided by 12 of a computer. So that's that. And then in the US, okay, to produce 1 shirt, that labor hour could have been spent and produced 1 computer. So this is what we have when we're thinking of opportunity costs. What is given up to pursue the production of 1 good here? Right. Well, when we think in opportunity costs, we will see that Mexico does indeed have a low cost advantage here. Okay. Mexico gives up less computers to produce a shirt than the US does. The US, to produce 1 shirt, gives up 1 whole computer. Mexico, to produce a shirt, only gives up 1/6 of a computer. That's a lot lower. Mexico has the advantage here, has the lower cost in terms of opportunity cost. Let's look at producing computers. Mexico has to give up a whopping 6 shirts. The US only gives up 1 shirt. The US has an advantage here. The US is the low cost opportunity cost producer of computers. So what we'll see is that with their given finite labor available, if the US focuses more on making computers and Mexico focuses more on making shirts, we're going to be able to increase production of both computers and shirts than we could if each country tried to do both. Okay? And what we're going to have is specialization, division of labor, and with trade, both countries are going to be able to consume more of both goods. Let's watch and see how this happens. Okay. Now, we're going to say for a given time period in the country, we've got 24 hours of labor available, and initially we're going to split it 50-50. Okay, 1/2 producing computers, 1/2 producing shirts. 24 hours, so we've got 12 hours for computers, 12 hours for shirts. In Mexico, remember, 12 hours required to make a computer, so you've got one computer. 2 hours required to make a shirt, so you've got 6 shirts. In the US, you've got the same thing, 12 hours for computers, 12 hours for shirts, 1 hour required for each, so you wind up with 12 computers and 12 shirts, for a grand total of 13 computers, 18 shirts. Okay. Now let's specialize. Let's have the countries tilt production towards where their opportunity cost is lower, in other words, towards their comparative advantage. Okay. And we're going to have Mexico, opportunity cost was much lower towards producing shirts, so they're going to put all 24 labor hours into making shirts and none into making computers. So 0 computers, 24 labor hours at 2 hours per shirt gives them 12 shirts. Now the US, the opportunity cost difference wasn't that dramatic, so we're not going to go entirely towards computers, but we're going to lean a little bit towards making computers. 14 hours towards computers, that means 14 computers, and 10 hours towards shirts, that means 10 shirts. Okay, so now we've got 14 computers and 22 shirts. Okay, notice already we've gone from 13 to 14 for computers, and we've gone from 18 to 22 for shirts. Okay, we have 1 more computer and we have 4 more shirts, okay, through specialization. Now all we need to do is find a price ratio at which each country can get more of at least one good without giving up the other good, any of the other good, and we'll have a situation in which both countries have benefited from trade, even though Mexico didn't have an absolute advantage at either good. Okay, Mexico was less efficient at producing both goods, but it doesn't matter. Okay, it doesn't matter. Both countries are going to benefit from trade. And if you think about what prices could arise here, go back to where there's some equal allocation in each country and no trade, and you have to realize, okay, the U.S. needs to have at least one Mexico needs to have at least one computer and 6 shirts. Okay, the U.S. needs to have at least 12 computers and at least 12 shirts. Well, with specialization, Mexico has 12 shirts and 0 computers. They need at least 6 shirts to stay equal. They have 12. They can give up to 6 shirts and still be equal to where they were with shirts. And if they get at least 1 computer, they'll be where they were with computers. Okay, so these are kind of the terms of trade for Mexico, if you will. They can sell up to 6 shirts to buy up to 1 computer. Okay, of course they'd like to sell fewer shirts and they'd like to buy more computers if possible. Okay, but this is their maximum range here. Okay, and for the US started with 12 and 12. Okay, so the US can give up to 2 computers, and it needs at least 2 shirts. Okay, so there's the range, there's the terms of trade for the US. Now where does trade actually fall? Well, that depends on lots of things. That depends on international markets, and that depends on bargaining power, and so on and so forth. But what we'll see here is that let's just pick one of these numbers in between, maybe between 2 and 6. Let's pick 3. Between 1 and 2, let's just pick 1. And that's what we'll do here. The US trades 1 computer for 3 shirts. Okay, so now the US winds up with 13 shirts and 13 computers. We went down 1 in terms of computers from what we produced, and up 3 in terms of shirts from what we produced. Mexico goes up 1 in computers from what they produced. It was 0. And they go up 3 in shirts. They go down 3 in shirts from what they produced, which was 12. Now, these numbers here, though, tells us what we've gotten in comparison to autarky, which is each country producing on its own. Mexico had only 6 shirts, and now they've got 9, so they're plus 3. US had 12 and 12, but now the US has 13 and 13, so US is up 1 in both. Okay. As we see, both countries have more of at least one good. US has more of both goods without having any less of the other goods. Mexico still has 1 computer. This is a win-win situation. Total consumption, okay, both goods is increased. It's increased in both countries. It is a win-win because of trade. Okay. And the very cool thing about this is We had to increase production and consumption of both goods in both countries, but we haven't increased capital or labor. If you think about a solo model, output is a function of technology, capital, and labor. Those have held constant. Okay? We didn't get any extra capital, we didn't get extra workers, we didn't get any new technology. Strictly through trade, we increase production and consumption. Okay? Trade, in a sense here, is the technology. It's one of the most ancient technologies. It's not complicated, but it is a very powerful source of expanding output, production, standard of living. Just trade. Trade is very, very powerful. Trade works. Okay. And I'm going to conclude on that point and say trade is the basis of all wealth. And let me go back once again to Adam Smith here, who says, "It is the great multiplication of the productions of all the different arts in consequence of the division of labor, which occasions in a well-governed society that universal opulence which extends itself to the lowest ranks of the people." So trade is a source of all wealth, and trade gives even the most disadvantaged people in the world economy a chance to contribute and earn and to establish some prosperity. Why do people complain about it so much? Okay, we see all these complaints. We see these hippies protesting against the World Trade Organization, which is trying to expand international trade. Okay, we see people accusing companies of hiring slave labor in these so-called sweatshops. We hear people saying that if you buy American, you'll protect people's jobs. What's the beef here? What's all these people's problems with international trade, and what are they going to try to do to prevent? What are they going to try to do to cut down on these alleged problems? Well, that's what we'll look at in the next lesson.